Oh man, college was a very dark, fun time. So yeah, I got to go Atlanta Rapper.
I just already feel like the excuses for Matt Stafford are kind of starting to rack up. Like,
and if that offensive line for the Rams is bad, it's the same shit.
And I saw Jake, our boy from Downtown's Rams, talking about this a lot this past week. But
he was on air right when that trade happened too.
He was talking about the Rams O-line compared to Detroit's O-line, and about how the Rams O-line has basically better stats, but then Detroit O-line like ranks better, and they were kind of going back and forth. And I was just like, here's the thing about the Rams O-line. They're not that good.
They're not that bad.
They're not that bad. They win off experience. They win off of like
scheme.
They win off of positioning. Like, they know how to lose and fight back and recover. They know how to like position themselves with between a player and the ball carrier so they can create a running lane without blowing anybody off the line.
Blocking is an issue though.
So they're very, very competent. And the other thing is they're also saved a lot by the fact that they had multiple backs. They did a lot of like different gimmicky things, and they also the quarterback got rid of the ball really fast. So that's going to be a thing for Matthew Stafford, is like, in order for this thing to work, it's like he has to completely reinvent himself and learn how to get the ball out quick, and learn how not to try to do too much, and learn not to try to push the ball down the field every time. But at the same time, you also gave up those first-round picks because he does give you that Matthew Stafford, I can't throw the ball 60 yards down the field type of feel. So it's going to be...
I'll convert a 4th and 16, and you'll be like, how did I do that?
It's going to be harder than I think people realize for him to make that adjustment at 32. Because you kind of have to break him down and then completely rebuild him and then bridge what he does well with what you need him to do.
No, I think you just trust him in certain situations, but you give him the ingredients and then say, okay, how would you do this? How would you do that? If the game plan is solid, he can go out there and execute whatever you need.
Okay, but the problem with what you're saying,
you got to keep him upright.
The problem with what you're saying is like
the focal point in the offense
is like, okay, you take somebody who is great on the barbecue and you throw them in the fucking kitchen. It's like, yeah, you know how to tell when meat is done, but that's not really your medium. So it's going to take some time for you to, one, learn the medium and operate within the limitations that medium brings. And then once you kind of figure that out, then you can bring your own style and flair that you had from being a great barbecuer.
I'd rather have somebody who's a great barbecuer who's going into the kitchen than somebody who is in the kitchen and doesn't know how to fucking season chicken.
I mean, that's true, though. I mean, that's Jared Goff, right? He knows how to operate in the kitchen.
But can't season it.
You throw him out there with some fire and things start getting out of control.
Burns his facial hair off.
All right, so that's about it for tonight. We're going to get into the rants. Anybody got something top of mind they want to get off? Is he, Eric?
Really? I thought, Super Bowl could have gone with another touchdown in the opposition, but I'm ready to see what happens this offseason, especially with all these quarterbacks trying to go from different teams, and let's see what happens in this offseason. And with this draft, I'm kind of excited to see what just happens with the upcoming offseason coming up.
Is he?
I thought it was really interesting, and I definitely thought the Chiefs were going to win. So that was just interesting to see. I think Tom Brady's really old. I can't believe that he's coming back to play next year. I don't even know how his body's going to recover. And next week, I'm excited because I've been talking to a NFL referee, and it seems like we got him lined up to come on next week. So I think I have some exciting questions that I'm excited to ask him. And real quick, I wanted to give a shout out to the homies for listening to me talk on this podcast for the last 2 hours. So thank you, ladies.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Salute to you, Izzy. Great job.
Want me to
Salute
go?
to you too, Kenny. Thank you.
Want me to go first, or you, Kenny?
Do you have something really funny and petty to say?
Jason.
All right, I'll go then. I'll go. So, yeah, I've just been processing a lot of things lately. Gonna be 29 in 8 days. And it's funny, I was Googling, I was looking, up my family history and, people's names and stuff on Ancestry.com and, asking my mom, trying to piece together certain names. And it's funny because, my granddad apparently, he kept a lot of things to himself to, protect the family so no one would come after us. Because, when he was 15, he beat the shit out of a Klansman. They murdered his brother in the bayou. And he pretty much on some Underground Railroad type shit by way of his aunt and uncle got smuggled to California at 15. A lot about his life, my grandma doesn't even know. And it's kind of just interesting to feel so connected to somebody and you don't know the full details of their story, but you feel like you have the gist of it. You feel like you have enough. And that leaded me to researching up my biological father because I found his address and his house and where he lives. And I was thinking you know what? I think it's time. I should probably try one more time to, reach out to him because things kind of ended really badly when I was 12. And from that point, I just never talked to him after that. We kind of went our own separate ways. And through researching and doing some, Facebook forensics, found out that, he had a stroke in 2015. I haven't found a death certificate yet, so I'm pretty sure he's still alive. But I also came to terms with the fact that, if I just never get that closure from getting an apology from him for what I feel like I'm owed, I'm okay with that. Because it kind of went back to me thinking about my grandfather and certain things in his life he didn't get to do or people he didn't get to reach back out to, and family he was disconnected from in Louisiana, and even family that I'm disconnected from in Alabama by way of my grandmother. I'm just you know what? I can be at peace with some things, and this is just going to have to be one of those things. And I think being in my 20s, that's one of those traumas that I'm not going to carry into my later years in this next phase of my life. So I'm kind of just been marinating on that. I actually found his wife on Facebook. She still looks like a raggedy bitch, and she has a septum piercing, and she's in her 60s. But that's a whole nother story. I won't fully roast her. She doesn't deserve any more of my time or oxygen. But it's just funny sometimes when people have wronged you and they pop up into your life one way or another years later, you go, I guess life got you after all. I wasted time harboring animosity and hatred towards you. And that took away from actually loving and caring about myself and my own mental health. So with that, I'm just excited for my birthday coming up. Probably going to be high as fuck at the beach off an edible. Eating some Mariah Carey's cookies and drinking some Mariah Carey's wine probably. I don't know. It's going to be a fun week. And I got next Thursday off and my birthday, which is on a Friday. So shit might get crazy. I don't know. I might have to throw my phone in the water.
I just want to say this. Something we've been saying on this podcast a really long time. A statement our grandfather did from my good friend Max. Sometimes when you win, you really fucking lose.
Preach!
And that's what happened this past weekend with the Super Bowl. The NFL thought they got the picture-perfect matchup. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, essentially a super team, the GOAT versus the baby GOAT, the reigning Super Bowl champions, an equally strong team, but more internally built, the Kansas City Chiefs. One of the AFL's original teams meets one of the longest laughing stocks of basically the first 20 years of their franchise existence. Face off in the Super Bowl, and guess what? It was the fucking dud. Jesus Christ, man. It was a dud. And honestly, it kind of makes up for like all this year. Like you really thought we were out of it. You really thought, oh, the Super Bowl is going to be so great. Like, oh, we're getting so much closer to normal things. And then you realized we only got a 6% vaccination rate. Only 49% of people say that they'll even get the vaccine, and we need like 76 to 80%. And well, yeah. Guess what? College sports are playing, pro sports are playing, but no fucking youth sports in California. And that's kind of what I've been spending my week on this past week on a number of things, but really just keeping up with what's been going on at the high school football level out here in California. And honestly, it's just seeming more and more likely that the season is not going to happen. I think they need to get to like 3 to 4 cases per 100,000 people, and right now we're still at like 30 to like 50, depending on where exactly you live in Southern California and what the numbers are based off of. And then you factor in the fact that the season's got to be done by mid-April. You need to have like at least 4 or 5 games for it to even be worth it. And then, well, you need 2 to 3 weeks of conditioning before you can even put pads on. So, yeah, basically we're coming up on 8 weeks away from April 17th, which is the last day. So, yeah, I don't think football season is going to happen. I don't know if a lot of sports are going to happen, because I think the other thing that people don't realize is because of all this uncertainty, like teams don't have schedules. So even once they get the green light, you got to schedule teams. And then on top of that, you got to have all your players get their physicals, get cleared, make sure they're academically available. Oh, and guess what? Some of them can play 2 sports. Some of them can play club and high school. Well, that just makes it even harder on the student athlete. That just gives them even more to manage in an even shorter amount of time. So, again, man, it's just a complete clusterfuck. And I know Kenny was saying this kind of like at the height, like of right when the pandemic started about this time last year, that high school sports was going to get fucked. And guess what? They just keep getting fucked. So I don't really know what's going to happen. I honestly don't know if they're going to have any sports, because the other thing is a lot of these schools couldn't afford to keep their coaches. So a lot of the sports don't even have coaching staff. So they got to post the coaching staffs and find the coaching staffs, and then they got to get cleared. So again, it's just a total and complete mess. And you know, I know that there's the whole let them play movement from San Diego County and some schools up north that's really putting pressure on the governor's office. But I don't know what's going to happen, because it ultimately comes down to the county. And here in LA County, we have one of the most conservative in terms of, you know, playing it cautious against COVID counties, LA County. So, yeah, probably not going to happen. And also, like, we don't have anybody really pushing for it out here outside of the private schools, which are just like, well, we're not even worried about CIF anyways, because we get enough money. We don't need CIF. We'll just have our own fucking unsanctioned club adjacent, high school adjacent super teams and just call it a fucking day. So yeah, lo and behold, the people who can't afford to play club football, the people who can't afford to get trainers, the people who can't afford to risk letting their kids out and getting sick because they don't have health insurance, or because they work at a essential job where they can't afford to get it because they'll get fucked by their employer. Like, guess what? Those are the people getting fucked even more. And on top of it, a lot of these schools aren't even doing anything to fucking keep these